Hello. Welcome
Hello.
everybody. I think everything's going through. We've done some steps to fix the technical issues we've had the last couple of weeks. So we might have new technical issues. And in that case, you just have to let me know.
We're all fine, thanks now.
We're all
How are
fine
you?
now. Thanks. How are you? Welcome everybody. There's so many in there. We got Django's actually in the chat as himself. We have Cal, we have Sin, we have Caleb, we have XY. I see Ray Nation, welcome. And then I think that's all who's floated in so far. But thank you guys. Welcome to our Last Jedi stream. I have been both looking forward to our Last Jedi stream and dreading our Last Jedi stream. Um, just because of, I feel like, hey Jay, welcome. So much of this has been discourse. There's so much discourse around this film. And today, we're going to try to make this about the film. We're going to talk about, we can talk about what we like, we can talk about what we don't like, just like we have all the other Star Wars films we've gone through. But like, this is not going to be a stream about people who hate The Last Jedi or people who love The Last Jedi. This is going to be a stream about The Last Jedi. So I think we're going to have a good time.
Can I just say that I really hate that we have to clarify
I
that?
know, I hate it too.
Can I let that be
Yes,
like
that
the
can,
only comment I make
yep,
on this today?
yes.
Because
Yeah. I have such a hard time figuring out where I would rank this movie amongst the other movies. Not that I've ever publicly shared my rankings, but like I feel like I like it a lot more than I feel like I like it, because whenever I think about it, it's just like the weight of the conversation that goes around with the movie that
right.
detracts from the movie for me. Um, but no, with that, I'm excited to talk about the movie. So what's really crazy is we've been getting to the Rise of Skywalker, and we're almost to the Rise of Skywalker. Like, this is the Last
Yeah.
Jedi. This is the one before. We're gonna see the Rise of Skywalker in a couple of days. Like,
Days, yeah.
days. It's days now. And like, to just go back, like, not even just to the start of the Disney era. Like, I remember 2005, the last time the Skywalker saga ended, and like how it felt then. And I know how I'm gonna feel on the other side of this movie, because I know how I felt on the other side of Revenge of the Sith. It was this overwhelming sense of, what is my life about now?
Right. Well, see what I'm afraid of, not like afraid,
Right.
but what I think about now is that when Revenge of Sith ended, it ended at a familiar place.
Right.
Like we knew where it was leading to.
Hmm.
We don't know where this is leading to.
This is true.
And so
Ugh,
like
and
that's a
it's
completely different type of thing.
ugh.
And but it's here. It's
It's
here.
yeah.
11 weeks we've been on our journey to the rise of Skywalker and we have
Yep.
arrived.
We're gonna see it, and like, I'm just excited. Um, but there is a lot to talk about, and I think there's something to it without getting into discourse itself. I think that even though there's any number of external elements outside of Star Wars that could be related to the discourse itself, I think that there's also something to it, to say that people responded to it so differently, and
Mhm.
and to have had strong reactions to what they had reactions to, says something, versus, and I don't mean to knock on this at all, but I love Solo. I adore Solo, a Star Wars story. But it didn't have controversy because it was just good. But they also didn't try to
Right.
do anything new. They didn't try to innovate the story of Han Solo. And I don't think they needed to. I think Solo was exactly what it needed to be and what it was supposed to be. But when you're doing
Right.
the middle chapter in a rebooted, absolutely make Solo 2 happen. I wish. But we're on that bandwagon fully. But when you have something that is the middle chapter in a, I know we had some disagreement as to whether or not to call this a rebooted series or not, on the Force Awakens stream, but basically a revival of a series. I mean, I think that
Mhm.
says something. Would you? People complained that Force Awakens was too safe, and then Last Jedi was so controversial. But maybe they'll get it just right for Goldilocks with the Rise of
Yeah.
Skywalker.
Well, and I think again, I don't want to talk about the discourse too
Right.
much,
Right.
but I feel like we make a misstep in trying to assign that much like intentionality to these directors.
Mhm.
Like like I feel like people talk about, oh, JJ went out of his way to make this safe, and maybe that's true. And I
Mhm.
feel like people talk about, oh, Ryan went out of his way to try to make a statement, and maybe
Right.
that's true. Or maybe they just made movies,
Right.
and The Force Awakens feels familiar because it's thematically familiar,
Right.
and The Last Jedi feels different because it did some daring things.
Yep.
Like that doesn't I mean, and I'm not saying that I'm right or wrong about this, but I
Right.
feel like so much about the discussion of this is about, oh, Ryan Johnson is just trying to like, I got to get my mug of fanboy tears or whatever,
Yeah.
like that's what I'm going for. Is I'm trying, and I'm like, really, like, like I don't know, like, and I feel like so much of that has like from the very beginning
Yes.
has prevented a lot of us from having meaningful conversations in a lot of our online places about
Right.
why we like this.
Well, and I completely agree. And as kind of a transitioning point into some of these points, I feel like the conversation around the Last Jedi has caused people have gotten so sick about talking about the movie that we still, I don't think, have actually hashed out everything that has happened in the movie, and that's largely because
Yeah,
we've only seen chapter two. We have part three,
yeah,
chapter
sure,
three, coming up, and I've been telling people for a long time to be careful to decide how much you like what's in Last Jedi until you've seen episode 9.
right,
Because, and not because I believe that JJ is going to retcon everything Ryan did, but because it's the middle part of the story, you know? It's
yeah,
like you turn on a TV show and you watch a couple episodes and then you're like, well, I know how this ends, and then you just never watch the finale of the TV show. Like you don't know that. You don't know what this is about, you know? And but I think when I rewatch Last Jedi to get ready for this stream, I find that there are so many things that happen in the movie that I think people just gloss over.
yeah,
And I want to get into some of those things. And I think it's also because everyone's trying to find meaning. We're still trying to answer the big questions of the trilogy. You know, was Kylo lying to Rey that her parents were nothing, or you know, is Snoke really dead? And everybody wants to turn it into these big things. And now we're just days away, and I can just go, you know what? Maybe we should just watch the movie on Thursday, you know, or
yeah,
Wednesday or Friday or whatever. In a couple of countries, it's out a day sooner. And finally, we can just go. We're gonna watch the Rise of Skywalker, and the Rise of Skywalker is gonna be what it is. It's gonna be fine. But I think one of the points is Canto Bite. If we want to jump in the movie, I think a lot of people miss what's going on in Canto Bite, and I don't mean that because people are dumb or because the movie's too intellectual and they don't get it. You know, maybe it is that the movie is kind of deeper and you have to watch it closer. Maybe it is that the movie has failings and doesn't explain things super well. Who cares? I think there's meaning there that you can still find. Um, and I say this because I missed it too. There's a video I did a ways back about Finn. And in the Finn video, I made a comment about how I didn't feel like Rose had much of an arc in The Last Jedi. And then a couple of months later, I was doing my Is Star Wars too political videos. And I realized that Rose did have a character arc. Um, but it's just not an obvious one.
right.
And I think that's the kind of thing that people can miss. I've been talking for a lot, so I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
I mean, I think I've got a couple of things about that. One,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the Canto Bite scene for me is, or like that whole like plot point. I feel like it slows down the film for
Mm-hmm.
me. Like, and I feel like that's one of my criticisms of the film is I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it it takes away from the things I'm more interested in to show me something that I'm comparatively less interested in.
Right.
But I don't think that makes it bad.
Right.
Like, and I think, and I don't know like how to file that criticism, um, and like because I don't think it's not something I dislike. It's
Right.
not something that I don't think works because it accomplishes the purpose. You know, they need to get onto Snoke's ship, and they
Yep.
can't do it themselves, and Maz couldn't do it for them, and so she sends them to find somebody that could. Like
Yep.
it fits in terms of the plot. I just really want, 6 hours of Ray and Luke on Octo, like,
Mhm.
and I want,
Yes.
an extended
Exactly.
4 hour version of the throne room scene,
Yes.
like that, like that's like it's not that,
Right.
and so by comparison, I like it less.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that I don't enjoy it, you know?
I
Like,
no, that's exactly it. Because I think that the strongest parts of the Last Jedi are absolutely Rey and Luke, Rey and Kylo, and the dynamic that Luke and Snoke have with the two of them. And that's
mhm,
where Ryan really shined in this movie. And I feel like if you really gravitate, I mean, there's a reason why you know so many of our Raylo friends really got excited about the Last Jedi is because that's what their dynamic, whatever it may be in 4 days, um, is so well done and it's hypnotic, it's magnetic. I was not in any way into Raylo from Force Awakens, and I like walked out of the Last Jedi seeing it. Like not that I actively ship it, but it made me okay with it.
yeah,
And I think that that's where the movie shines. And then you go to the other parts of the movie that are all solid. Like if the Last Jedi, it wouldn't have been called the Last Jedi, but if Episode 8 was just Canto Bight and Poe and Holdo as its own movie, and the crawl read Ray has vanished, and we just
yeah,
didn't get her story at all, those parts would have still been a really good, solid movie.
right,
I don't think there would have been. I mean, the people who hated it would probably have still hated it. Hey, Nolan, welcome. But I don't think that it would have been the same. It's just that there's something it's done really well, and then there's something that's done phenomenal. And
yeah.
the parts that were phenomenal, I do think suck energy from the parts that are good. And I don't think there's anything you can do about that. I don't know that that's bad filmmaking or not. It's just what happened.
Well,
Um,
and I think, my instinct is to compare it with other Star Wars films, and maybe that's a bad instinct. But
mhm.
like I think about it in comparison to Empire Strikes Back,
Yep.
where the main things I like about the Empire Strikes Back are the Luke and Yoda scenes.
Yep.
But people don't get up in arms because, oh, we're back with the Falcon in the asteroid field
Right.
again. And so like I don't know why it's different other than the fact that we all have nostalgia for the Empire Strikes Back, and the Last Jedi is we experienced in real time, you know. And
Well,
so like I don't know what that difference is, because to me, like I don't feel any differently when I'm watching them,
mhm.
other than the fact that I'm more used to. I mean, and maybe it's just, I knew Han and Leia more than I knew Finn and Rose,
Mhm.
and I mean I don't know what those differences are, but it's not altogether different in terms of like the pacing. You take
Right.
away from, this deep philosophical, spiritual, conversation that the student and the master are having, and cut away to the action sequence that all the rest
Mhm.
of the characters are involved in.
Yeah.
Like it's the same type format as Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah. I think maybe part of that is in Empire when you get to the end of the movie, most of our heroes have reconnected in some way. Like
Yeah,
the Luke Yoda scenes build towards Luke's confrontation with Vader in the way that Rey Luke scenes build with Rey seeking out Kylo. She's seeking out like they don't build up to her seeking out Snoke. It's never about Rey going to have a confrontation with Snoke. It's about Rey looking for a new hope, and um, she thinks that is Ben Solo, and she goes to find him. And I suppose I should
right.
amend. I was talking about how magnetic and phenomenal and all of that was. I meant to say when I was going on that gushing fest a minute ago that for those who felt Last Jedi fell flat are probably people who weren't captivated by that storyline
By that, yeah,
for whatever
that's fair.
reasons, which is completely legitimate. You can just not be into their storyline for whatever reasons you're not into it. But if it doesn't capture you, then a good portion of the movie falls flat for you. And that's that, people shouldn't feel bad for that. But I think that everything about The Last Jedi kind of keeps our characters separated, and that's intentional. And you can like that, and you can not like it, but it's intentional. And I think that's where you get people like John Boyega and a lot of the, and some of the other actors who are so excited about the Rise of Skywalker because they're like, we're all back together again. You look at Empire, and yes, they're separated for a long time, but Han and Leia and Chewie and company get captured by Darth Vader. So Luke's whole conflict is a build up to the guy who's holding his
Hmm.
friends captive. So you know when
Right.
you're watching it that everyone is going to meet up at the end of The Empire Strikes Back. And other than Han being in
Hmm.
Carbonite, everyone is together at the end of The Empire Strikes Back. Where at the end of Last Jedi, yeah, they're all together, but literally in the last, like the final moment of the film is Luke and Kylo squaring off and Rey reconnecting the group. And I
Yeah.
think that's what's different for people. And again, that's not good or bad. It's a style choice, and you're gonna like or not like a style choice. But I
Yeah.
think that's ultimately why the two movies feel differently.
Yeah. I think so too. Um, and again, like I know one of your critiques of this is that you feel like the movie doesn't do a lot with Finn,
Yeah.
and it really doesn't. And if you go into this, with the way you felt about Finn in The
Mhm.
Force Awakens,
Yep.
and you feel less invested in the Raylo story, whatever
Yeah.
that turns out to be, then I can see where that Canto Bite thing grinds on you more because you want
Right.
more from Finn
Right.
than what it's giving you. Um,
Well, and I want to say this about Finn because especially I don't know what Twitter's been like for the last week, because I've been off of it. But prior to, Boyega's been saying some things that have been upsetting some people, and again, to stay away from discourse, I just want to clarify. Like, I don't think that Finn was treated poorly necessarily in The
mhm.
Last Jedi, and I don't want to say that he didn't have a story. Um, a lot of people hear me say that, and then they're like, "He fought Phasma. Did you watch the movie?" And I'm like, "Yes, I watched the movie. I saw he fought Phasma." Like, okay, but like when you watch Finn, I think it was Caleb was talking about Rose's role in the movie. Um, Finn is in a point where he's trying to find himself. Right? We see him in Force Awakens, and he's the stormtrooper who's just walked away from from the First Order. He knows he doesn't want to be in the First Order yet. He's not sure if he wants to be in the Resistance yet. He still doesn't know that at the start of The Last Jedi. And he wants to find Rey. All he knows is, again, however that plays out and however they feel about each other, Rey is the only other person he really knows besides Poe. And he wants to keep Rey safe, and he knows Rey is out doing something really dangerous. So that's his whole driving line. He meets Rose, and the purpose, in my opinion, how I've interpreted, is Rose is supposed to teach Finn, no, there's a bigger picture than just keeping your one friend safe. Like, we can keep the galaxy safe.
Right.
And to me, I think Finn feels like a red herring twice, right? He was marketed as the Jedi in The Force Awakens, and then he wasn't. It was like, fine, whatever. But then his plot line is to go and save the day, and he doesn't save the day. But he doesn't save the day in service of Poe learning how to be a leader instead of a hero. And
Right.
then even Finn's character growth, where he's like, I want to be a hero now. And at the end of the movie, he sees Luke out there standing against the First Order, and he's like, we got to get out there and help Luke because now he's the hero. So that's his character growth.
Hmm.
But then it's Poe's character growth to go, no, we need to be patient and let Luke do his
Hmm.
thing. So even Finn's character growth is in service of showing Poe's character growth at the end of the
Right.
film, in my opinion, and you can read it completely differently. None of that makes me hate The Last Jedi. I just want in The Rise of Skywalker Finn to have a storyline that's purely Finn's and is not in
Right.
service to somebody else's character. Um,
Well,
so,
and I think to that end too, one of the things I noticed rewatching this for today
mhm,
is like I've never really liked the character of DJ,
mhm,
honestly. Like I remember even when I read that comic, I was
yeah,
not really into it. I think you did that review because I was not really into it. But
and I did like the comic.
one of the things I that kind of caught my attention
Mhm,
watching it this time, and maybe it was because I thought a lot more about Finn going into this because like I think previously I had overlooked the extent to which Finn like didn't immediately buy into the resistance,
Mhm.
and I don't know why I overlooked that because that's kind of the point.
Mhm.
When he's there with Rose and he's like, "I'm just trying to save my friend. Like
Yep.
your whole resistance shtick, that's nice for you, but I
Mhm.
got to get out of here because my friend's gonna show up and she's gonna die, and I
Mhm.
don't care about this cause the way that you do."
Yep.
And DJ and Rose, to talk about the value of Rose's character arc in this too.
Mhm.
DJ and Rose are like the angel and the devil
Yep.
on Finn's shoulders.
Yep.
Rose is like, no, we have to fight for the things we love. We have to care
Mhm.
because if we don't, then evil wins. And
Mhm.
DJ is live free, don't join.
Right.
And I've heard that line before, but until I watched this film for this discussion, like
Mhm.
it never stuck out to me that that's the opposite of what Rose is telling him.
Mhm.
Like DJ is like, you got to take care of you and yours because of
Yep.
course you do. And the good and the bad, they're all the same. The same people, are manufacturing the weapons for both sides.
Mhm.
like like that whole argument that DJ makes is in contrast to what Rose is trying to teach him.
Right.
And I think like that's what I liked out of this, and I still like comparatively wish there had been more for Finn to do, but
Mhm.
I really got a different appreciation of what Finn's journey in this film was. And I
Yeah.
think it's more than just fighting Phasma. I mean, I
Yeah.
like that he fights Phasma
Yeah.
because I want more Phasma all the time.
Always.
But
Yeah. She's not dead, by the way.
um she's not
She's not.
until Delilah Dawson tells me face to face that Phasma's dead. I won't believe that she is.
Yep.
I mean, I don't care if we see her die in this film until Delilah Dawson tells me that she's dead.
She's not.
Um, she's
Phasma
not.
is the
Um,
most powerful being in the galaxy, actually.
but and yeah, I give an immense amount of authority to
To
Delilah
Delilah
Dawson having ownership over that character.
over the character of
But
Phasma. Yes.
I think that was one thing out of a part of this film that I think is my least favorite part.
Mhm.
I found a new appreciation watching this time,
Yeah.
and I feel and honestly, I feel like I was able to do that because I set aside the notions that the discourse has put in my head about this going into it. And
Right.
that's not to say that that discourse is wrong, but
Mhm.
I feel like we started out talking about how I feel like the way we've talked about this film has kept me from thinking about it to the extent and in the same way that I've thought about literally every other Star Wars film.
Right.
And and I was glad watching it earlier today that I was able to connect with this in different ways.
Yeah. I agree. Every time I watch it, I pick up on different nuances, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of great stuff going on in the chat, and we will get to that. But to kind of stay on what we're talking about, I mentioned that Rose kind of has this subtle character arc, and I don't want to say like I want to be careful how I talk about it because I really do feel like a lot of people miss it, but I don't want to say it in a I'm a Rick and Morty fan, and I'm going to tell you you have to be so smart to get Rick and Morty. Like I don't want to have that kind of attitude. Actually,
Yeah.
don't watch Rick and Morty. I'm just making fun of Rick and Morty fans, unabashedly. But
We
I
just our friendship just leveled up at this moment right now. I just want you to know
yeah,
we our experience points went up and
that's great.
we've leveled up
We
now.
bonded a little. Um, but the thing what I figured found with Rose is I think people get so excited about the Fathier race, understandably, or the chase scene
Hmm.
rather. And there's Rose gets Canto Bite, and she hates Canto Bite, understandably, because she knows this is a city that got rich off of war profiteering, and they're all
Right.
rich because they're in the business of war, which is a very on the nose critique to make right now. And she's like, I wish I could put a dent in this beautiful town. I can't remember the exact line, but it put a fist through this beautiful, terrible town or something like that. And they do that when they ride on the Fathiers. They wreck the town, and
Yep.
at the end of the chase, um, Finn goes, "Well, it was worth it to tear up this town." And then Rose lets the Fathier go and says, "Now it's worth it." And every time I watch that, I think of how superficial that victory is because
Hmm.
everyone in that town is freaking rich. Like they won't even notice the money it costs to repair anything that got dented, and
Right.
it will be fixed in a day. Like I never finished. I need to, but I never finished the Canto Bite collection. But I remember that the whole thing was it was a tourist industry, and anytime there's a problem, they get it fixed right away. right?
Yeah.
What they did will not be remembered 3 hours after it happened. Because what it was is tearing up the town. I mean, they were doing it to escape, so I'm not that dense. But the added idea of tearing up the town was fighting what they hated. It wasn't saving what they loved. And to
Hmm.
some degree, helping the Fathiers get away, even though they will probably be caught again, was saving something. And when Rose says, now it's worth it, when the Fathier gets away, like, I think that's something there. And then that goes to, people talk about the one thing I disagree with most people who are kind of in my camp that Finn got shortchanged in Last Jedi is I don't think saving Finn from death is actually shortchanging him because it
Yeah.
really wouldn't have done anything. Like if he had crashed into the big super gun, it wouldn't have done anything. He would have died needlessly. I think that would have been worse for the character. I think Rose saving him was really good. To me, Rose saving him showed her understanding that this is not about wrecking some rich people's buildings, that this was about preserving what we love so that we can keep fighting another day. You know what I mean? And I think that's Rose's arc, that she goes from the anger that's justified of I'm gonna tase anybody who's trying to desert, and I'm gonna wreck a city, and I'm just gonna get really ornery about everything, and I'm not gonna look at it any kind of bigger picture. She, if you think about it, Poe is responsible for Paige's death in some degree,
Yeah.
and Rose has gone to the guy who bungled something and caused her sister to die instead of Holdo, and like we should do this crazy plan because that's who Rose is in this point. She wants to make it hurt, and then she learns not to make it hurt, but to act out of love, and that's really her arc. Like her line, which is kind of the theme of the movie at the end of The Last Jedi, isn't the character she was the whole movie. It was the end of her character arc, and I think that's something people miss. And I never hated Rose. I've never hated Rose, but she never really inspired me either. But once I understood that as an arc, I
Hmm.
liked her so much more because she
Yeah.
wasn't the person who. Yes, Man Rat, welcome. This is a spoiler discussion for a movie that came out 2 years ago. So if you haven't seen it yet, you should probably not watch. This is a spoiler discussion for The Last Jedi, not for Rise of Skywalker, which no one has seen yet. But anyway, that was the end of my point, I think.
Well, to talk about Rose a little bit too. Um, I think it's interesting because the arc that you're talking about,
Yeah.
I think it's completely right, but it's a different arc than what have seen her character arc as
Mhm.
so far. Because um, what at least when I watched it today, what I saw her arc as being,
Mhm.
and the appreciation I got out of it
Mhm.
was she goes at the beginning of the film from having such an idealized version of everything,
Yeah.
like you are Finn the hero,
I
and
love
Finn's
that.
like, no, I'm not a hero. But she works behind pipes, like she
Yeah.
doesn't, like she's literally in the background
Yep.
of all of this, and all she has been able to do is idealize and make legends out of these people.
Yep.
And I think about it in this way because I think the point of the film for me is Luke's journey in this, and how Luke's journey informs Ray's.
Mhm.
Where Luke learns to be the legend despite the limitations of the man.
Mhm.
I think I think Rose learns to look beyond the legend and see the people.
Right.
And so by the end of the film, and this is not to say this is right and your thing is wrong.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think, um, but I think for me, one of the things I noticed about Ray's journey, or not Ray, but Rose's
Rose.
journey in this film, is
Mhm.
that she starts off with Finn as legend,
Mhm.
and I don't want to use the word loves because I think it implies too much, but she
Mhm.
has, admiration for Finn, the resistance hero.
Right.
And by the end of the film, she has connected with Finn, the person.
Right.
And I think that's an important, especially given what I think, again, the film is also trying to tell us.
Mhm.
I think that's an important kind of thing too.
I don't disagree with that at all. I think that's largely Ray's journey, and I kind of want to put off Ray and Kylo because I feel like once we start there,
Yep, yep,
yeah.
yep.
But just to say it now, why it would be in context, Ray's journey with Luke is very much she's idol. Well, first she idolized Han, and Han never failed to live up to that, but he died. And then
Yeah.
she idolized Luke,
I mean,
and
almost in a way that Han's death like cements that idealization
yeah,
because like
it's
he
a
becomes
confirmation
the
bias. Yeah,
yeah, yep,
because he did exactly what you would expect the hero to do.
right, yep,
I didn't think of it that way, but that's absolutely right. And then she meets Luke. Luke fails to meet her expectations, and then she goes to who she's hoping is gonna. Hello, Noelle, welcome. She in Ray Nation. I don't think I said hi to you either, but welcome. Maybe I did. I don't know. There's so many people. Thank you for being here. But you have she goes to Luke. Luke lets her down. Then she goes to what she's hoping is going to be Ben Solo, and I'm hoping is going to be Ben Solo in the next movie, but isn't Ben Solo in Last Jedi, or at least he is not Ben Solo without Kylo Ren.
right,
And I don't believe she's given up on him, because then what is the next movie going to be about?
yeah,
But she's let down by him. And so her story is idealizing people and letting people, and feeling let down. But you're absolutely right. That's what I didn't necessarily pick up on that myself, but I think you're right that Rose is doing that too. In the same way that Poe is being the hero, that he's the guy who wants to be the idealized hero, and his journey is to become the true hero and not the look at me hero.
no, I think that's exactly right.
And I kind of say
Um,
that because when we're done with Rose, I kind of want to shift into Poe and Holdo, because I see a lot of that going on in the chat.
that's fine to me. I'm ready to move on. I got
Okay.
holdo maneuver thoughts.
I saw a couple of you had read Leia, Princess of Alderaan by Claudia Gray. Read anything by Claudia Gray all the time. Before Last Jedi, I had as well, and uh, I appreciate that too. The thing is, I feel like The Last Jedi kind of sets you up to wonder if you should trust Holdo or not. And if you've read Leia, Princess of Alderaan, you know you should trust Holdo. You know she's not a spy. Like, there a lot of time has passed, but there's no way the young woman that was in Princess of Alderaan would be working for the First Order in Last Jedi. So when I watched that, I was pretty sure that we just had two good people with not complementary plans going on. But
Yeah,
I think it does set you up to think that she could be a villain. Um, and because even Poe is like, she's basically committing treason because she's gonna let everybody die. Um, but no, it added a lot to that, and to already know her friendship with Leia.
well, let me ask you this question. I mean, well, first I'll say yes, Leia, Princess of Alderaan is an amazing book that people didn't read because they thought that it was a kid's book and wouldn't be important, and boy, were
Right.
they wrong. Um, but go like separately from all of this, go read
Mm-hmm.
Leia, Princess of
Princess of
Alderaan.
Alderaan. Yes.
It's one of my favorite canon things.
Yep.
Um, but I wonder, even before we get into maybe the conversation of who was right or who was wrong
Right.
more explicitly, and I know some of our friends in the chat have thoughts about this
That are
because they've talked about it for the last 2 years.
and they're
Um,
and they're probably going to be different than ours, and that's
yeah,
okay.
that's fine. That's fine. Do you think this would have been different if the movie had told us what Holdo's plan was without telling Poe? Because, like, is it a
Hmm.
different question? Because honestly, when I watch this film, I look at Poe and I'm like, yeah, you messed up. You don't get to be involved in everything now
Right.
because you haven't learned your lesson yet. You're still in timeout, and when
Yep.
you come out of timeout, then we'll tell you what's going on here.
Right.
But is that the same thing or a different thing than us not knowing what the plan is, or if we knew and Poe didn't, would that rob the film of the point of Poe's storyline? Like, can you do one without the other? I guess is the question.
I think we could have known Holdo's plan and have gotten the point of the movie. But I don't think it would have been as intense as it was.
Mhm.
And I don't necessarily know how to get into that without getting into the too much, at least starting into the who was right, who was wrong conversation. But
No, that's fine.
agree with it or not. And I know Jay is probably going to disagree with it, but whether or not you like the point that's trying to be made, I think Poe's story is about, how do I put this? I talked about this a lot in my Aftermath series. That there's a lot of crazy things that happen in those books. There's a lot of crazy things that happen in different Star Wars books and movies. You'll see anytime Anakin Skywalker goes off and does a thing. We are trained as Star Wars fans to like rebels. We are trained as Star Wars fans to know that the character who's rebelling against the Empire, rebelling against the First Order, rebelling against um, stodgy Jedi masters, maybe not to the point of becoming a Sith Lord, but to
Mhm.
the point of having emotions. We are trained that they are right and they were right to rebel and they were right to stand up against authority, and that's what Star Wars has always been. Last Jedi, I don't think goes against that idea, but I think it
Yeah.
does say that you have to be somewhat responsible. Like, just because you are a rebel doesn't actually make you right, and that you can have the wrong intentions. So Poe's plan is 100% the type of thing that would work in a Star Wars movie. You go and you get the code breaker and you hack the ship and you get away. Um, and I think that when it doesn't work, the lesson is you can't do a crazy a scheme and just think it's going to work and fly by the seat of your pants all the time. Sometimes you have to be smarter than that.
Right. Well, and I think another thing, which I guess I had noticed before, but I was reminded of watching it today,
Mhm.
um, was that it Poe's plan, puts him at risk, but because Finn and Rose use DJ and DJ betrays them,
Right.
like that plays into it too, and that's
Yep.
part of the point. When you go off book, you can't know what the outcome is going to be,
Yep.
and sometimes that works for you and sometimes it doesn't. Like I remember when we I don't know if we did this for our Rogue One discussion or if it was just
Mhm.
a conversation we had a while back, you and I,
Mhm.
but like the question becomes like how does it's almost like I'm blanking on the name of this effect. I'm a bad social scientist right now, but
Mhm.
like there's an argument in social science theory that when you do something, like the observation of a thing changes the thing you're trying to do. So like
Right.
being in it like changes it, and you can't know. And so like, did their involvement in Rogue One, or did the fact that Leia had the plans lead to Alderaan being destroyed?
Mhm.
Like, can you try to help and make things worse? Is a conversation that we've had a lot recently, and I think that's what that is.
Mhm.
If they had not been able, if DJ hadn't tipped them off to the cloaking sensor code that they were using
Mhm.
to hide the smaller crafts, then the smaller crafts would have gone to crate and would have been fine.
Right.
And there's a lot of that too, and it's just I think it almost rises above the question of right or wrong at
Mhm.
that point, because like you're right, Poe's plan is the type of thing that in every other Star Wars thing would have worked, but this is the one time it didn't.
Right.
and and that doesn't necessarily like who's right and who's wrong kind of loses its meaning a little bit for me in that moment, because it's trusting in what you know versus taking a risk in a way.
Right.
I feel like I've gotten distracted here a little bit, but
Well, I guess to kind of discuss that, just it kind of changes the subject a little, but not really. I've seen two people in chat point this out. So people have pointed out that if Poe didn't destroy the dreadnought, they would have gone to hyperspace, not knowing that the First Order could track them in hyperspace, and they couldn't really get away from the dreadnought, and the dreadnought would have destroyed them anyway. And this is justification for what Poe did. And I want to address this because I think that argument is both right and wrong, and both to the point and misses the point.
you say why it's right and let me say why it's wrong.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, it's technically correct that if they had gone to hyperspace, the First Order would have tracked them, and in theory, the Dreadnought would have eventually been able to destroy them because, in theory, it has a farther range than the Star Destroyers. And so I get where they're coming from, but I feel like it also misses the point.
The reason why I think that's wrong is because we know all of that and they don't.
Yep,
like like they don't know that. Like Poe doesn't know that they're going to track them through hyperspace.
yep,
Like from their perspective, what they know is that as soon as they go to hyperspace, they're free.
Mhm.
And at the moment where it stops being about buying time for
Mhm.
them to get off the surface and becomes let's take out this dreadnought because taking out a dreadnought is really cool.
Mhm.
The whole let me jump in an X-wing and blow stuff up moment.
Right.
Like that's Leia's point, and Leia's point is correct unless you have the information that we have, which was
Right.
impossible for them to have.
Right.
I don't know if that's why what you were gonna say
Well,
was.
sort of. I don't think that that's a thing in of itself. I think where what becomes wrong or not wrong is 100% Poe's attitude.
Yeah,
I think that's the big thing for me. Is Poe blatantly disobeys Leia's orders, but ultimately, let's say in a hypothetical, Poe's not doing it to be a hotshot pilot. He's doing it because he genuinely believes in his heart of hearts. He has a gut feeling because he's a member of the Church of the Force, and the Force is letting it like he's got to destroy this destroyer. He goes against Leia's orders, and they destroy the dreadnought, and then they go to space. At that point, Poe needs to understand that doing the right thing requires sacrifice, and his sacrifice is his demotion. And now he's like, my favorite part is when they announce Holdo is now in charge of the fleet. Poe is literally sitting there, like, hearing somebody go, there's only one logical choice for someone to take over. And he's sitting there, like, is it going to be me? No, son. You just got demoted to captain from commander, which, by the way, commander is not the next step to general or admiral. And you have a freaking vice admiral in your fleet. So no, in no universe was it ever gonna be you. But you're sitting there like, is it me? And that's how you know what Poe's true intentions were. That it was
yeah,
not about we will be safer if we get rid of this dreadnought. It was about I need to look good. And the fact that he goes up to Holdo and is like, look, honey, I have some great ideas. So like clue me in on it, even though you have no reason to trust me because we've literally never met. The only thing
right,
you know about me is that I just got demoted. So you should fill me in on all of your plans. So there is a universe where Poe could have destroyed the dreadnought because he believed in his heart of hearts it was the right thing to do. And then he could have gone, hey, Admiral, Vice Admiral Holdo, you don't know me. You probably know I got demoted. I believed it was the right thing to do. I hope we can work together. And then
yeah,
Holdo could go, thank you. And then after that introduction, Poe could go, I don't feel like I know what's going on here. I have this wild scheme. And then she could go, you've been real nice. So let me tell you what my plan is. And then he would have gone,
right,
that's a great plan. And then there wouldn't have been a movie. So I think there's this idea that like Poe has to be completely right or completely wrong, which is just not true. Poe is a good pilot, he's a good leader, he did right things, but he did it with a completely wrong attitude. You look at things Anakin Skywalker did, and I get Poe's not a Force user as far as we know. I do have that Jedi Warrior shirt, so maybe he does have Force powers. Holding out hope, but if you want to look at Anakin, he could have gone to the Tusken Raider camp and killed the Tusken Raiders, the warriors, and saved his mother, and that would have been dark, but it wouldn't have been like a pathway to the dark side because he was doing it to save his mom. Instead,
right,
he snuck in and found his mom, and then wrecked the village because it was an emotional reaction. Hello, Rule, welcome. Um, what Poe was doing was he was happening to do the right thing, but he was doing it for the wrong reasons. And the other thing we're
right,
taught in Star Wars is your intention matters. The
yep,
reason why you do things matters. It's
yep,
important. So I think it's absolutely plausible to say Poe was doing the right things for the completely wrong reasons. Um, and I mean, then you get to towards the end, and Holdo even says she likes Poe. She's like, he's
yeah,
got a lot of spirit. I like him. After he just pulled a mutiny on her, right?
right.
So I don't think we're supposed to think that Poe is the worst guy in the world. We're just supposed to think he needs to get his head out of his butt.
Well, and I think that's Leia's whole point too. Like, I don't think she ever demoted him like permanently.
Right.
Like, like she demoted him for the purpose of putting him in timeout for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Um, but like and maybe I add the extra context of having read the Poe comics now to
Right.
this, but like that's like the whole saga of the Poe comics is
Mhm.
Leia telling Poe, "No, look, we all understand you're the best pilot we've ever seen before. Like none of us is questioning that,
Mhm.
but being the best pilot we've ever seen doesn't necessarily mean that you
Mhm.
have all the necessary skills to be the leader we need."
Right.
Like she tells him in those comics, we got a lot of pilots. We don't have a whole lot of leaders.
Mhm.
And you have the potential to be a leader and you need to see the difference
Yep.
between that. And I think he goes into that fight against the dreadnought knowing that he can take out all of those surface cannons. Like he
Yeah.
knows instinctively that is within his ability,
Yep.
but he doesn't have the leadership ability, the tactical ability
Mhm.
to say, let me think about what's going on in this moment. You know, even if he just goes in and takes out all the surface cannons and then goes back
Mhm.
to the ship and says, well, the next time we'll regroup, and then they don't have surface cannons anymore.
Right.
You know, and then when the dreadnought comes out of hyperspace behind them, which they couldn't have known ahead
Mhm.
of time, you know, then they take the bomber fleet that they still have
Mhm.
and come up with a better plan.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that's the point too. And I love the way that you put that about um like Poe said. It reminds me, so this is gonna be a weird
Okay.
Terry tangent here for a minute. Um but have you seen the movie Paul Blart Mall Cop 2?
I've not. No, I can't say that I've seen Mall Cop 2.
So just go with me for a second because part of
I'm
the
really
plot
excited for
of
wherever this goes.
of of Paul, I'll tell you more about this later because there's a thing you need to do. But part of the plot of Paul Blart Mall Cop 2 is Paul Blart was a hero in Paul Blart Mall Cop 1. And so he's going to this Mall Cop conference in Las Vegas and Paul Blart Mall Cop 2.
Mhm.
And there's going to be a keynote speaker at this conference,
Okay.
and somebody tells him, "Hey, there's going to be a keynote speaker at this conference because they're going to let somebody who's done something really heroic lately tell us all about how to be better mall cops." And
Mhm.
Paul Blart assumes that it's him, having shown up at this conference and not been asked to be the keynote speaker. Thinks that he's going to be surprise asked to be the keynote speaker while at the conference. And yeah, we'll do a Paul Blart Mark Out 2 Street later on.
Okay.
Um, but
Yep.
that's Jay's
Apparently,
asking for it.
apparently that's
But
needed. So there you go.
but like but like that's the thing. Paul Blart shows up, hears
Yep.
there's going to be a keynote,
Yep.
and thinks that, oh, I have to be that guy,
Yep.
even though the conference is literally underway and I've not been asked yet. Like when you said that, like that's where my mind went. Because you're right, Poe is sitting there thinking, oh, obviously I'm the guy that gets to be the leader in this moment,
Right.
e- even though I know for a fact I just got people killed. Um, Whereas at the end of the film, Poe says, "Follow me," and they all look to Leia, and she's like, "No, now he gets it. Follow him."
Yeah.
Like it's not that he was right or wrong in what he did. It's
Right.
what his intentions were,
Right.
and when his intention was, "I want to be the person in charge because I think I got the better ideas,"
Right.
versus "I want to be in charge because I understand how to lead these people." Like that's a
Mhm.
different type of thing.
Right.
Um, but
No,
yeah, Paul
I
Blart Mall Cop 2. There
I
you go.
mean, I didn't realize I was missing out on such a cornerstone of wisdom
You're
there.
you're you're definitely not. So
But I think to talk about another great middle act, Last Jedi, the I think another thing that people forget, this is kind of the last thing I really have to say, not to keep belaboring this, is I actually have a video on this. I don't necessarily remember everything I said in it because I made it like 2 years ago. But it's about Poe and Holdo. And I think the other thing that people always forget, and I say this to cut both Poe some slack and Holdo some slack, is, and we were talking about this somewhat last week, um, people forget, and it's easy to forget, that Last Jedi happens right after The Force Awakens. And so both Poe and Holdo are reeling from the Republic has just been destroyed,
right,
you know? And so um, Holdo is not going to want the hotshot pilot. And then um, Poe is acting on so much instinct to defend so much, and I think that's an important point that people miss too. Is you have two people here who are mourning and grieving and freaking out because 5 planets were destroyed a couple of days ago. It was 2 years for us, but it was a couple of days ago for them. So you
Yeah.
have this traumatic event that's bigger and scarier and worser than the Death Star because it was several planets and it's basically the entirety of the New Republic. Because as we find out in the Aftermath books, they don't have a lot of military, and it was largely all based at Hosnian.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing people just need to remember is as everyone, Poe and Holdo alike, are making these decisions, they're making them. I hate to invoke this name, uh, but it's basically like having a 9/11 event, and there you go.
Yeah.
It's they're freaking out because this big thing that just happened.
Yeah. I think that's fair too. I think we lose sight of a lot of I mean, because even and again, not necessarily to pivot until we're ready, but even with like Ray and Finn, like I think we forget that in the Last Jedi, Finn is like a week from having been a stormtrooper,
Yeah.
and Ray is like a week from having been living in a hollowed out, walker on Jakku.
Hmm.
Like, Y wings are good as long as they're not piloted by Nora Wexley. Um, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but
Now,
yeah,
now
that
we're
was
now we're getting distracted. We don't need to go down
um,
that rabbit hole that we both would go down. But that's what I really have to say with them. Um, and that is a thing that goes on in this movie. I had to. It was difficult for me to even make the thumbnail because there's so much that happens because you have the Finn and Rose adventure, and then you have the Poe and Holdo kind of power struggle, and then you're still dealing with Ray and Luke, and then Ray and Kylo, and then Kylo and Luke. In that whole, it's almost like there's three separate movies that they managed to put. Sorry, neither of us are big fans of Nora. It's okay if you're fans of Nora. Neither of us. I will say I liked Nora significantly more in Resistance Reborn. I think she was much better written by Rebecca Roanhorse. Is what I will say. But we both struggled with her a lot in Aftermath.
also, I will say that most of the reason why I don't like Nora Wexley happens in uh, Empire's End. So
Yeah.
there's that also.
So if somebody
Um,
in the chat wants to finish the book, Jay.
there you go. But and yeah, you're right. I like Nora better in Resistance Reborn.
Yep.
But what else should we move on to
To the
the
big
Ray
one,
Luke Kylo
the
stuff,
the big
or are there
stuff.
other things? Let's talk about Chewie and the Porgs
There
first.
we go. Oh, Chewie and the Porg. I love the Porgs. I mean, they've kind of been outshone by my son, which is probably fair to talk about on the stream because I don't think there's anybody left who doesn't know about my son. Um, but uh, they're still pretty cute. Um, I like the way they just kind of took over everything before the movie came out.
Yeah,
I feel like Porgs were the vast majority of the Last Jedi marketing campaign.
yeah. And I also want to just mention how much of a kindred spirit I felt with the caretakers on Octo in watching this
Yeah.
when this kid comes and starts blowing holes in walls, and I'm like, yeah, I'd be ticked off too. Like those their facial expressions. We
The
had a
fish
moment.
nuns, I love them. They're great. My favorite part with them is when Ray like cuts the rock in half and it falls and breaks their cart, and they're just like, like I really thought they were gonna break into a Star Wars rendition of How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria, like somewhere on there.
I've not even thought about that before.
Like it was just gonna be like, what are we gonna do with this chick? Oh man. But no, I thought they were fun, and I saw Ray Nation was like Chewie ate that pork. I'm not a big fan of people eating porks, but I'm also kind of like he already killed it and cooked it. If he doesn't eat it, it's then wasted. So then you've just murdered a pork for no reason. Like at that point, he should at least eat that pork.
Nobody cares that much about Rontos.
That's true.
Rontos might be really cute too. You don't know.
Oh man, the what XY is saying. I love the if you've read Pirate's Price. Oh my gosh, I love the Falcon having the porgs and then them hanging out with Hondo. I think
No,
Hondo and the porgs is like really my favorite porg combo, which is completely irrelevant to this stream. But like, read Pirate's Price.
that's a lesser plot point in Spark of the Resistance too.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I haven't finished that one, but
Yeah.
I know Justine Ireland's a big porg fan as well.
I
What?
like Chewie in this film though. I like Chewie coming in to um,
That is a long name. Welcome, Atheon. Welcome. I hope I said that right. Yeah, we're
we're
excited
we're
for.
very excited
We
too.
are. It is not an unpopular opinion here.
But I love my favorite Chewie moment in this is when he knocks down Luke's door.
Mm-hmm.
Like Ray's been it's like Ray had to go get her dad. It's like, Dad, this guy won't let me in,
I
and
know.
Chewie comes and just like kicks in
Chewie,
the door. He's like, "Fine, listen to this girl. This girl
Chewie,
has
you
come
got
all this
you
way,
right.
and you're
Her
gonna
turn.
listen to what she says."
Chewie is Ray's adopted dad. I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
will. I will accept nothing else. I saw. I saw there was a meme. I cannot even take credit for this. I can't remember who made it, but it came out a while ago. And it was like Ray spends 2 movies trying to find an adopted dad. Meanwhile, Chewie is there flying around the galaxy, taking care of her, taking her to see her boyfriend he doesn't approve of, all the while loving her. And I'm like, yes, it's so true. He's literally taking her to the boyfriend he doesn't approve of. I'm like, it's so
He
good.
even made her dinner.
He even made her dinner. I'm
Um,
like, I live for it. I live for it. Oh my gosh. But yeah. So yeah, I think yeah, we can probably dive in. We can dive into the big topic of
So
of
let me just go ahead and get this out of the way as we
okay.
move into the big topic, and let me
Yep.
talk about the biggest thing that I take issue with in this
Okay.
film,
Okay.
which is again, like I say all this honestly, we don't do a whole lot of film ranking on this channel,
Yeah.
but like Last Jedi, if it's not my favorite film, it's like my second favorite film. So like understand all of these criticisms, like this is still like one of my favorite things in all of Star Wars. But I don't like the saber toss, and
Yeah.
I don't like the saber toss not because of the saber toss. I don't like the saber toss because it's played for a joke.
Mhm.
Um, like the way and that I don't think that's anything about the acting. I
Yeah.
don't think that's anything about the script. Honestly, I think it's the way that the sound and the music were edited in that moment. Like it makes it come off as a punchline. And yeah, we're definitely don't want any type of leaks here.
Mhm.
So yeah, don't go down that route at all.
This is
Um,
definitely not the channel you want for leaks.
yeah. Um, but I don't like that moment because I think I love Luke's story in this film. Honestly,
Mhm.
it's my favorite thing about this film. It's one of my favorite things in
Yep.
Star Wars, and
Yep.
I think that moment, the way that it's played in the film,
Mhm.
undersells the import of that moment.
Yeah.
And I think there are other things that Luke does that are meant to be funny,
Yeah.
like when he's drinking the milk and when
Mhm.
he's catching the fish. Like he's
Mhm.
trying to like weird Ray out so that Ray will leave him alone.
Right.
The
Yeah.
same way
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
Yoda does weird
Yep.
things in Empire Strikes Back to try to like
Mhm.
mess with Luke's head. Like all of that's fine. I
Right.
just don't like that. I don't like that it's played for a laugh line.
I I I think
But
that's fair.
also when I watched it this time,
Mhm.
I didn't feel that as much either. So I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
That's fair. I completely see where you're coming from. It never bothered me as much as it's bothered other people, but it also doesn't bother me that it bothers people, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. I agree that it's played as a joke and that can be disconcerting. I think that the rest of the stuff with Luke kind of works because it isn't the first time you see Luke. I can understand that it's jarring to have this really what's the word I'm looking for, irreverent humor. Irreverent might not even be the right word, but he's just like, I don't want this, and I get that. I think it would have been different if the first time you met Luke he was solemn and then he goes into being silly. And I think it works with Yoda because if you're watching the film's release order, you don't know who Yoda is. You don't
Right.
have this idea of who Yoda is from other movies, and then you're seeing him and you're seeing him behave differently. Um, and even if you are watching it chronologically and you get back to Yoda, Yoda does have his more lighthearted moments especially if you've watched the Clone Wars. But I think that lands better because Yoda is set up as a reveal, where Luke,
Mm,
the reveal is the irreverence.
yeah.
Um, it really, like I said, that part doesn't bother me as much because I think it sets the tone so fast, not in a comedic way, but so quickly tells you, nope, this movie isn't what you thought it was, and we're telling you right now.
Right.
And I think that's helpful. The part I like about that isn't the saber toss. I love when he walks away, Rey's utter confusion, and her like,
Yep.
Master Skywalker. Like I like the way she says it, so I can kind of forgive the jarringness because I love Rey's reaction to it so much.
Right.
But yeah, that's really what I'd have to say about it. Is it doesn't bother me, but I completely understand why it bothers people.
And I don't think, to go with Chad, I don't think it was meant to be a joke, and I think you can definitely read it as a comment on all the anticipation.
Mm-hmm.
I just like literally it's a thing that would have been fixed if they would have just blocked it differently.
Yeah.
Like if like the camera angle had been different. Like I don't know what it is about just the way that it's shot. Like if he had thrown it if he had thrown
Yeah.
it back at Ray, like
Yeah.
tossed it back to Ray and walked
Toss
off.
it at her
Like
feet or something like that. Yeah.
yeah, like I feel like there's a way to do the exact same thing
Yeah.
that solves my problem with it.
Yeah.
It's just like the way he just like I don't know. It's something about the physicality of that moment
Yeah.
that I think underscores the intention of it in a way
Yeah.
that takes me out of the moment.
And I
But
think that's fair. Um,
um
I also hope Anakin pops up, but we'll see. That would have been a huge thing for them to keep under wraps. Ryan says, yeah, and I mean, it is kind of meant to be like a mirror image to when he throws the saber away in Return of the Jedi.
yeah.
There it was dramatic, and here it was flippantly. Never found it funny. Thought it was completely serious. I mean, I don't know. I think it's a scene that's intended to be read a couple different ways. I think you can take different things out of it, and I think it might be something like what Jenko was saying. I think it might have been intended one way, and it just might not have been something that lands. I mean, that's just a thing. Hey, I was gonna call you Solo Pirate, but that won't mean anything to anybody else here. But CK, I saw that they dropped the Hizzy Dubs. I haven't watched it yet, but that's funny. And then I was well, no, he's not nice or friendly because he's trying to do what Yoda did to him in Empire. He's trying to chase her off. Like that's really the long and the short of it. And I think it starts to make her go away and then ends up being a test.
No. Um let's see. We try not to really talk about our favorite ones,
Too
Atheon.
much.
Yeah.
Which I mean, like we
At least in
sometimes
terms of like ranking them.
yeah, I think ranking gets messy. Really, I like all of them. Like, there's a couple that are. I mean, actually, no, that's not true, Django. Both of our favorites is the holiday special.
Well, that's obvious.
That's
Yeah.
unabashedly true. That both of our favorite is the holiday special. That one we will say all of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm already looking forward to. I've got to watch it sometime
Yeah,
in the next couple weeks
for
because
Christmas.
I need my mind evaporated again. It's been too long.
Oh man, but yeah. So you have Luke there, and Luke is coming off the way he's coming off, and people liked it or they didn't. And I mean, it's valid to think that he was being too gruff on Rey, and I think the point was that he was being too gruff towards Rey. Like I
Hmm.
don't think he's glorified by the film for the way he treats Rey. I think he's shown to be in the wrong. That's kind of the point. But I do like the way they interact, and I was kind of talking about this. Was it Oh, it was the stream that we don't have public because we had too many technical problems. We were talking about this on our mysterious, you may not see it, Resistance Reborn stream. Of Rey. Rey is a really interesting character because she is somehow utterly, boldly confident, and yet so vulnerable and insecure at the same time.
Hmm. Yep.
And so you have Rey, who has so many insecurities that really come down to she wants to be related to Han Solo, she wants to be related to Luke Skywalker, she wants to find her place in all this. But then she has the boldness of just walking up to Luke Skywalker and is like, Kylo Ren is going to, I like the way she explains everything like she's a really precocious 6-year-old. She's like,
Yeah.
there is no light in Kylo Ren, and he is going to destroy the galaxy, and you need to come and fight him. Like, I love the way she talks that whole movie. And it's 100% the way you would talk if you were raised a scavenger and weren't really around people and didn't really have conversations. Like,
Yep.
it's weird, but it makes total sense. And I adore her for it. Every way she acts. Um, Rey is a character that I liked in Force Awakens, but I connected more to Kylo and more to Finn in Force Awakens. But Rey in The Last Jedi is somebody that I am completely and utterly attached to. I don't feel like getting super personal on the stream, but when Last Jedi came out, I was going through stuff. And her journey really found me where I was when I was going through that stuff, and in a way that I just didn't connect with her in The Force Awakens. And I think part of that is just a timing thing. But just everything about her, I think, is so cool.
Right. I mean, and I think too, like, I love Ray in that moment. Like, I love when Luke finally agrees to train her and they're like doing their first lesson.
Yeah.
And she's like, I'm gonna reach out. Like, there's just something so like earnest about it. And then Luke, he's got the leash, he's like, oh, you feel it? You feel it? That's like, that's so like,
Mhm.
I don't know. I just love it
Yeah.
because like, and I thought about this, and not to try to like take away from Ray's adulthood,
Right.
but I think about, Yoda says in Attack of the Clones,
Mhm.
about how wonderful the mind of a child is, and it's not that Ray is childish, but she has that type of earnestness about
Right.
her, that a lot of us, you know, did away with when we stopped, believing
Mhm.
certain holiday characters came and visited us this time of year.
Right.
Like we lost that sense of magic, and Ray still very much has it,
Mhm.
and it could be because of her relative isolation for all her life, but I choose to believe that it's part of who she is as a character.
Mhm.
And I just love that moment because it it works so well for me with
Mhm.
how jaded Luke has become, that you get somebody who is even more earnest than he was.
Right.
like like he was the most earnest person of all earnest
Yeah.
people in all the galaxy
Yep.
when he started. He's like, I think about my favorite Luke moment in the original trilogy, and maybe this says something about how I think about Luke in the
Mhm.
original trilogy, but one of my favorite things is in A New Hope when Leia walks out of the cockpit and yelling at Han, and Luke's like, I care. like that's so Ray. Ray.
Yeah. She's like, oh, I think we just lost Django. Hold on. He'll come back. Believe in your hearts.
Hello?
Hello, Django. We can see your icon.
I don't know what just happened. It happened in the moment.
I think you said that's so Ray, and then Disney thought you said that's so Raven and hit us with a copyright strike and
Maybe so.
killed your video.
Discord literally like just reset. I, but yeah, it's so we're not just Disney shills. We we didn't do the right thing with our
Right.
um with our shill check last month, and Disney was mad at us. Um, but but I think that and that's just so like Luke is so jaded in that moment, and Ray is
Right.
so earnest, and
Right.
I think it just so works because I think it shows um it shows like the two parts of this journey that they're
Yep.
both on. Like Luke has completely forgotten how to be earnest in that way because he all he sees is failure,
Right.
and that's why Yoda has to come and teach him, the opposite lesson that Yoda had to teach him before.
Right.
Or in some ways the same thing because Yoda has to teach him to believe again,
Right.
and it was his lack of belief that was the problem the first time around.
Right.
Where, as we said in that cursed stream, Ray can't help but believe.
Right.
Like one of my favorite things. None of you will ever see this stream again, so I'll say it now for the benefit of you. But like my thoughts about Ray is Ray's with Yoda in the swamp, and goes to lift the X-wing and lifts the swamp because that's
Right.
how much she believes.
Right.
Like she doesn't need to be told, you know, don't try, you know,
Right.
just do it because like that's her instinct is to just do it.
Right.
Like she does these things that she has no possible way of knowing because she just believes it so instinctively.
Mhm.
And that's if anybody less earnest goes to Octo, Luke doesn't get on board.
Right.
Like if it's not Ray from nobody, Ray from the nobody from nowhere, you know,
Right.
if it's not Ray, then Luke doesn't come back. Luke doesn't get involved. And I
Mhm.
think it has to be Ray for it to work.
Right. No, I agree. And I think there's something too that maybe, does she have this because the Force chose her? Did the Force choose her because she has this? We may never
Yeah.
know. But I think there's something to that as well. And she really is a brilliant character, and her story. We were talking about this earlier in the stream with Rose. I think the reason why I will always love The Last Jedi, even though I have my own issues with it, I don't think it's a perfect film, but I adore it, and I largely adore it for this one scene, which is Luke is explaining the first version of what happened between him and Ben, or
Mhm.
or Kylo specifically, Ben Solo, and he's talking about the Jedi and their hubris, and they felt a Darth Sidious, and blah blah blah. And the first time I saw The Last Jedi, I came out of it very conflicted. I knew I liked it, but I didn't really know how I felt about it. And you can even see I have a first impression review on here where I was really struggling to even say if I liked it or not because I came out of it not knowing how to feel. And the second time I saw it, when I kind of knew what was coming and I could let go of everything else and just take in the film, Luke's standing there, his back's to Rey, and he's describing everything that happened and how he let the galaxy down and let Ben down. And his line of, because I was Luke Skywalker. And when he said that in the movie theater, every Legends EU book I had ever read, which mic? My mic or his mic? Every uh, every book I'd ever read, the video games I had played, anything that involved Luke, where he was the successful Jedi Master, floated before my eyes, and I realized I had idolized Luke in this way.
Yeah.
And I've always enjoyed Star Wars, but I've never viscerally been pulled into a Star Wars movie and felt like I was a character, like I was viscerally pulled into Rey in that moment, realizing that I idolized Luke. I had Luke on this pedestal, and um, just how intense that was. And I kind of make this argument. A lot of people's issue with the sequel trilogy is it varies so much from the Legends universe. I think the sequel trilogy is stronger because of the Legends universe. I think that if we
Yeah.
had never seen the successful Luke Skywalker that had his Jedi temple, that had these students who got married, who had a son, if we had never seen that Luke, then we wouldn't feel the pain of what this Luke feels like, because
Right.
we know what he could have been, and we see what he is instead. Um,
Right.
and
Well, and I think too, to the extent that legends are like literally legends,
yeah,
like that's the way we're supposed to canonically interpret them. Is these
yeah,
are legends about these people, like,
yeah.
and that's why I love the book. I almost wish I could get it off the shelf. Legends of Luke Skywalker,
I probably can.
because like that's the whole point,
Yeah,
is that Luke has taken on this, you know, that's what he even says.
yeah,
Like, you know, Ray says, you know, you're the guy that saved Anakin Skywalker, and
yeah.
he's like, yeah, and then I became a legend, and look all the good that did me.
Right.
Like that's his whole point, is that he has achieved this status that he knows is not real,
Mhm.
and he learns how to become that literally by projecting himself, like
Yeah.
literally by embracing
Yep. He
the
he
the
become. Yep.
the facsimile of it. Like he
Yep.
becomes this literal projected legendary character that
Yep.
cannot be touched,
Yep.
because that's what he needed to be in that moment. Like
Yep.
he tells Ray, "What do you want me to do? Go face the First Order with a laser sword all by myself?" And that's what he does.
Yeah.
Like
I.
it,
Yep.
he embraces it, and like I just, it gives me chills. Like,
Yeah. No. I. Yeah. And I feel like people who think Last Jedi is about all your heroes suck didn't really finish the movie. because of what you just said. Luke literally, I mean, earlier in the film, he's like, "What do you want me to do? Walk around out in front of all of the First Order, swinging my laser sword and blah blah blah." And then he literally does the thing that he describes as a hypothetical to Rey. Um, and yeah, I think that's a big thing. Real quick, for the Kylo love. Hold on, let me pick up my webcam. I don't know. I let's see. There's Kylo, and then behind me is my Kylo shrine. Hold on. Let me show you my Kylo shrine. So there's my Kylo shrine. There's a lot of Kylo love here. So you are not alone. Is really what I'm saying. There we go. I just wanted to show off my Kylo collection. That's not
Never a
relevant to the
bad time
stream.
for that. But yeah, like Solo says, even by the end of the film, like the children are telling the story of Luke, like he is still legend, like through that whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's why it's an interesting contrast to me with what we were talking about with Rose earlier.
Yeah.
Rose learns to see beyond the legend. Luke learns how to become the legend.
Yep.
Like Luke knows he is legendary and rejects it, and realizes that's what he has to do.
Mhm.
Um,
No, I agree. And now that we've had Kylo brought up in the chat, we've not even touched anything about Kylo's story in this movie.
yep,
Um,
but too bad. Sorry. We'll see you
no,
guys next time.
no, not my boy, not my boy. I came out of so I like, I said earlier that I didn't come out of Force Awakens a Reylo, but I did come out of Force Awakens a huge Kylo Ren fan. I loved him before the movie because his armor reminded me of Revan's, and then I loved him after the movie, and then I came out of Last Jedi and I felt validated. Like I had spent 2 years. Yes, I love the Matt Radar Technician video. Um, I'd spent 2 years talking about how he's so much more than just diet Darth Vader, and I have many boys, to be honest, in Star Wars. It's true, but it's like, see, he is actually a really cool character, and I love the story of what Kylo and Rey are telling together. Again, you know, I lean towards, I think they're going to take it romantically, but I could be wrong, and that's not necessarily what we need to talk about today. But even with or without that, I love the idea that Rey is telling the story of somebody who doesn't have a lineage. And I was a person who, I was so wrong coming out of Force Awakens that it doesn't even really matter. But like I walked out of Force Awakens thinking she could still be related to Luke. And so I say this as a person who had my expectations of Force Awakens dashed in a giant pot into ash. But I still enjoyed where this movie went. But I like that she's telling this story, that she's the person who came from nowhere. She quote unquote doesn't have a place in this story, and her story is the one of finding who she is on her own, because she is enough on her own. But then you have
Mhm.
Kylo, and his story is finding himself because of his lineage. That he has this journey to take because he's the son of General Organa, Princess Leia, the son of Han Solo, the hero, the grandson of Darth Vader, and a queen of Naboo. He has to find out who he is in spite of his family. And they're
Mhm.
both on this journey of identity. And I think we were talking about this in the Force Awakens stream. I really feel like the sequel trilogy is all about identity. And I love that Kylo and Rey are both trying to find who they are, and they're coming from completely different paths. And I love Kylo's story of, him killing Han Solo is very literal but very metaphorical. He's trying to kill his lineage. He wants to let the past die because he doesn't want to be held responsible to the past. Where all Rey wants is a past. And I think it's important to tell that story because everyone is going to be one of those two camps. Every one of us is either going to feel like we come from nothing or to feel like we're living with a legacy of something. But both of us can go on that same journey, and I think that's important because it also equalizes. that the person who is trying to find who they are without this backstory can find who they are along the side of somebody who has this backstory, and that those are
Right.
equal paths, they're equal value, they're equally important. Nobody is better or lesser than anyone else. I don't know. I think there's just something important going on there, which is why I'm a
Well, and
redemptionist.
and I think you're right. That this really is about identity for a lot of people, and I feel like that's one of the like societal things that we're dealing with right now is like
Mhm.
people discovering like who they are,
Mhm.
and it's easy for Ray and Kylo to both find their identity completely in who they come from. Ray in the fact that she comes from nothing and no one, and Kylo and I mean even Snoke taunts him with it. Like the
Mhm.
the only reason I trained you is because I thought you could be the next Vader, and look how much of a disappointment you were. Like
Mhm.
like that's his whole shtick is that he thinks that he's supposed to live up to this,
Mhm.
and they both in their relationship with each other, whatever that relationship turns out to be, um, they both realize that they can move
Mhm.
beyond that. And I don't think Kylo internalizes the lesson. I think that's part of his struggle is because he thinks he has to kill it all in order to move beyond it.
Right.
Like, and I don't think you have to. Like, I think he's wrong about that, but
Mhm.
I don't think he's wrong in wanting to sort of find a way because like he doesn't want to be his dad. He doesn't have the same type of connection to his mom. He
Mhm.
tried to study with his uncle and he thinks his uncle tried to kill him.
Mhm.
Like he doesn't know who he is in relationship to all these people.
Yeah.
And and that's why one of my favorite Kylo moments in this film, and this is apologies to all of our Raylo film fans, but my favorite Kylo moment in this film is Kylo and Luke at the end.
Yeah.
When Kylo, did you come here to apologize?
Yeah.
And Luke's like, well, I am sorry, but no, that's why I'm not here. And
Yeah.
Kylo's like, I bet you're sorry. You ought to be sorry. like like there's just so much like I'm making light of it, but there's so much
Yeah.
emotion in that. And
So
Kylo's
much.
like, I could care less whether you're sorry, old man. I was a kid and you tried to kill me. And like that has like determined my entire life after
Mhm.
all of this.
Yeah.
And like I just there's so much about that that you can just you and again I said this when we did The Force Awakens last week,
Mhm.
but I don't know that I can't come out of watching these films and not hurt for Kylo Ren.
Right.
And that's not a thing that excuses his complicity in the atrocities of the First Order. But I can't watch these films and not want to see him find that happiness
Mhm.
and that type of peace that he so obviously needs in
Right.
his life. And I want him to find that one because I think the light side of the force can give him that.
Yep.
Um, but I want him to find that because it's so obvious that he feels hurt and betrayed, betrayed by his parents, betrayed by his uncle, betrayed by Snoke, now maybe even betrayed by Ray. We don't know what that relationship's going to look like
Right.
after that, but I want him to get a hug. Like he needs a
Right.
hug,
He needs a
and
hug.
somebody go hug this boy. um,
He definitely needs one. I think my favorite Kylo moment, oddly enough, is this moment, but not for the reason you think. I love the moment where he kills Snoke, but it's
yeah,
how he does it. And even more so than that, I love how Snoke is like, I can see his mind, and he's turning the blade to strike his true enemy. So Kylo's like turning his blade in his hand, but he's also turning the lightsaber. So he's like masking what he's going to do for Snoke by making it look like he's doing it to Rey. But the other reason why I really like that, and you can go back to way back 2 years ago when The Last Jedi first came out, I did some really poor production quality videos about Kylo and Rey. But I made this point, and I don't see a lot of people talking about it, and I like to talk about it, is if you go to the infamous Han shot first scene in the cantina with McClunky, um, and if you go back to at least the version where Han shot first, if you watch Han has I'm doing it with the wrong hand, I think, but Han like is playing with the wall to distract Greedo so that he can shoot Greedo with his blaster, and Greedo is focused on this hand and not the hand that he shoots him with. And it's the same move. Like, to me, Kylo kills Snoke the same way Han shoots Greedo. because he is his father's son.
Yeah.
And that's the part that gets me every single time.
Um,
I like that they killed Snoke in this movie. I don't think, if Rise of Skywalker can give me even one moment that was like the throne room scene happening, because I wasn't expecting Snoke to die in the movie, and all of a sudden he's dead, and then Kylo and Rey are fighting. You gotta say, I don't talk in movies. I might, if it's premiere night, I or something like that, I might um I might react. Sorry, I got distracted by chat. I might react or clap or something, but I'm not going to talk to you in a movie. And during that scene, I literally looked over at my friend who I went to the movies with and said, "What is going on?" Because I don't know what's going on. And I got all excited and they were fighting together. And then halfway through that fight, I went, "Oh no, Ray, this isn't what you think. This isn't what he." And I'm like, thank God that scene was so loud because I'm pretty sure I was saying this all out loud in the theater because I was just like, ugh. And like nothing will ever match that moment for me. I think seeing Star Wars in theaters. Um, and I loved it, and I don't know, I don't even care if people think the choreography in the scene is dumb. It looks cool, and
no.
I don't know, I'm here for it.
Well, and I think that the choreography of it, shows that there is a connection between them. Like
Mhm.
whatever that connection is, whatever form it takes, like you can't deny it. That there's something between them, and I feel like they both know it in that moment, and
Yeah.
they think that means different things.
Yeah.
Like Ray thinks that means, she's like, okay, well now we got to go save the fleet, right? And
Mhm.
Kylo's like, okay, now we've got to murder all our parents, right?
Right.
and like they take completely different things away from that. But they realize in that moment that there's something there and that they have something to offer one
Yeah.
another because they both have a similar need. Like
Mhm.
they're both trying to define themselves
Yeah.
in this type of identity way. And you're right, I lost it too. I remember that was my screen, my background
Yeah.
for like a year after as soon as we started getting high res images
Yeah. I
from
was like,
like
oh man.
pirated Twitter accounts or whatever. Like that was like, it's so beautiful.
Oh
Um,
man.
Aesthetically and like thematically.
It was crazy. And there's so much like that whole scene because you can. What I love about that scene is it's a lesson too. Both Snoke and Rey, Snoke a little bit more permanently, but Snoke and Rey both learn a lesson about interpreting visions because he gets killed by Kylo because he misinterpreted a
Yep.
vision. And then Rey's vision of Kylo, everything she said happened. She saw a vision of Kylo turning on Snoke. She saw a vision of them fighting together. And maybe her telling Kylo even is what gave him the confidence to kill Snoke in that moment. But where she
Yep.
made the assumption is that he would do it because he's turned back to the light, not because he just really wanted to kill Snoke, because who wouldn't want to just kill Snoke?
Right.
And there's something to that of to be careful of visions because they can show you something, but you're always going to put your own personal bias into it. And I think that's important.
Right, and I think, we talked about this when we talked about Return of the Jedi. How, it would have been useful if Yoda had mentioned, "Hey, this guy has Force Night Lightning."
Right, just
You
so
know,
you know.
like this is one of those one-off lessons that in a different world, in a different scenario, Luke could have said, "Hey, yeah, visions are awesome, but
Yep.
they don't exactly happen the way you think they will."
Right.
Like that's knowledge he could have given her going into that. But but Kylo learns that same thing too. So it's
Yeah.
like it's a lesson he has too, because he thinks he's seen all of this backstory about Rey, and that's going to allow him to,
Mhm.
if again, depending on how you read it, either manipulate her into joining him or
Yeah.
tell her the truth as a way of freeing her from her past so that she can join him.
Right.
Um, but
Yeah. No. I'm excited to see where all that goes, and I think there's a lot there. And there are whole channels that have been devoted to the thematics of what's going on with Rey and Kylo. There's a friend of the channel, the Girls with Sabers. They're a very, very Reylo centric channel, but they're wonderful. They're one of the most generous channels I've ever seen. We have like a third of the subscribers we do because of them. And so if that's the kind of thing you're interested, they're far more intelligent than I am to discuss those type of
No,
things. I personally don't want to get into too much of like what what they mean until we see Rise of Skywalker, because I think
right,
I still think there's so many variables um, to where things could go, and I think to if I have any beef really with how people talk about the Last Jedi's, I think it's a mistake to talk about anything happening in this movie thematically as if it's a conclusion. Um,
yeah,
because
that's fair.
we're we've seen one chapter, and one third and two thirds of the story are going to be told by a different person. So that I think there's something to that too. JJ is going to get two shots at this thing where Ryan got one, and I really don't believe that JJ is going to undo anything Ryan did. I genuinely don't. JJ is on record for saying he read the script for Last Jedi and loved it. Like, I don't think it's his goal to undo Last Jedi. But he is his own storyteller. So
Yeah,
I think it's dangerous to get too attached to anything in Last Jedi because it is the middle chapter.
right. Well, and I will also say this. Maybe this is Professor Django's passing wisdom on
Yeah,
expectations in Star Wars films, because like I didn't get disappointed in The Force Awakens because not because I thought that Ray was no one, but because I didn't go into it needing Ray to be anything.
Jedi, you mean?
Eh, well, I just remember a lot of that in like after Force Awakens, so maybe like
Oh,
after
okay.
Force Awakens
Yeah,
into the
yeah,
Last Jedi.
yeah. Okay.
But I was gonna say the same thing with Raylo. Like I came out of the Force Awakens actively thinking there's definitely nothing romantic between these people, and that
Right.
was, I'm like with you. It changed when I saw the Last Jedi.
Yep.
Not that it's necessarily something I'm fingers crossed for, but it's something I'd be on board for.
Mhm.
But like I just worry if we go into these films like we love speculation, like crazy
Yep.
theories are what we're about.
Yep.
Um, but um, if we're talking about identity and speculating at the same time,
Yeah.
um, there's
There's that.
caution is
Yeah.
advisable.
Well, and like I think there's something to people always talk about like don't have expectations. And at the end of the day, I think it's a little unrealistic to say never have any expectations because we all have expectations. No one is gonna go to the Rise of Skywalker and expect a 2.5 hour Justin Bieber music video, right? To say that we have no expectations is unfair.
Right, sure.
It's just what kind of expectations, and even then I think it's the difference of needing. Not to derail the chat, but you'll know this, some of you will know this, there was a fairly sizable popular movie that came out sometime this year that I had a lot of issues with, that I didn't think I walked into with a lot of expectations. I felt like I walked in with none, and I was still let down, versus I walked into The Last Jedi and I had a ton of expectations. You can go back and you can watch the couple of videos we had from before the movie. I thought we were going to find out that Rey was a Skywalker. But what I said was that if they did it in a way that worked, I would be okay with it. Like, I couldn't
Hmm.
conceive of how to do it in a way that would work, but I'm not a movie maker. And if somebody found a way to make it work, great. It's just something I can't see. And I feel like going into Res Skywalker, I have things that I want. I want Kylo Ren redeemed. I'd love to see the ghost of Anakin Skywalker. But if these things are done well, it's okay if I don't get what I want out of the
Right.
movie. My argument would be the movie that I was let down by over the summer. I don't think things were done well, but that is an object or a subjective statement always. So that's just kind of my own personal PSA is expectations are one thing, but needing things is
Yeah. I think that's a fair sort of summarization of the point
different.
I was trying to make too.
Hmm.
Um, but what else is there? Like with all of these things, I feel like we've
Yeah,
talked about a lot and talked about very little
at the
at the
same time.
same time.
Well, because there's
Um,
so much more to pull. I mean, we didn't talk about my boy Yoda.
yeah, I was just about to say that. So like we talked a lot when we did our
Empire stream.
Revenge of the Sith and our Empire
Empire stream.
streams
Yep.
about Yoda.
Mhm.
and how Yoda's dealing with his own failure in that. And I think the Last Jedi is a perfect, assuming that we don't see Yoda in the next film, which we
Mhm.
definitely might.
Yeah,
Um,
it's something that can be on the table.
um, um, I think the Last Jedi, if we don't see Yoda again, is
Mhm.
a really great ending to Yoda's story.
Mhm.
When Yoda tells Luke, "You have to teach them the value of failure,"
Mhm.
and Yoda tells Luke, "You have to realize that you're the master now, and being the master means that they're going to grow up and
Mhm.
they're going to not want to learn from you anymore. Like
Right.
we are the things they grow beyond."
Yep.
Like that, there's so much wisdom in that for
Mhm.
Luke, and Yoda is the only other person that could give Luke that wisdom.
Yep.
Like Yoda is the only other person that we know of that has that same perspective, having been in charge of a Jedi Order and lost it all.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's so immense that Yoda is there.
I think I got so happy when I saw him because I didn't know he was going to show up. I think in hindsight, after I walked out of the movie, I think I remember seeing a leak somewhere by accident where people thought Yoda was going to be there, but I'd forgotten it because I don't follow leaks. I don't like leaks, um, and I try to stay away from them and forget them if I happen to see them. But I wasn't expecting him to show up, and he was there. And Yoda is my favorite character in all of Star Wars, even though my son is rising through the ranks. That is an entirely different relationship. Um, Yoda will always be my favorite character in all of Star Wars, and seeing him there, and I love seeing Yoda in a state where it felt like Yoda finally got it right. Like he's so wise, he's so smart, he's been through so
Mhm.
much, but he had that arrogance problem in the prequel trilogy, a massive arrogance
Yeah.
problem in the prequel trilogy. And then we get to the original trilogy, and he's you know dealing with the same loss that Luke had. And you're absolutely right. Like they're the only two people in the galaxy who could understand what the other one went through. You could probably argue that it was an odd choice. Like take production issues out of it. Like take whether or not they could get Ewan McGregor or something out of it. You know, maybe it would have made more sense for Anakin to talk to Luke because we never got to see that. Or maybe it would have made more sense to see Obi-Wan talk to Luke. But I think that even with a familial connection or something like that, that Yoda is the one who would get it. That where
Mhm.
Obi-Wan and Anakin had great loss, they didn't have the specific kind of loss that Yoda had and that Luke was now feeling.
Yeah.
Um, and I also think that it's very pertinent when Yoda shows up because Rey says in The Last Jedi, "You've cut yourself off from the Force." Like when she first really experiences the Force, and you have that weird montage thing, which is one of the other things I don't like, just because it's no other Star Wars film has a montage like that. That's just like a weird experimental film thing. But whatever, I can get over it. It's like 30 seconds of my life. But after she has that moment, she realizes that Luke has cut himself off from the Force, and I think that's why Luke doesn't catch Rey and Kylo Force skyping. I
Yeah.
think that once he connects to Leia, that's why I think we're gonna through I don't know if it's gonna be Project Luminous or something. We're gonna learn that Yoda wasn't able to talk to Luke until Luke opened himself back up to the Force.
Yeah.
And it's also conveniently after that Luke has opened himself up to the Force that he catches Kylo and Rey Force skyping. So I think there's a lot going on there.
I think so too. I think so too. Which I will say too. We can talk about force skyping if you want to, but if
Yeah.
you've not seen it before, we have a whole bunch of videos from right after the Last Jedi came
Mhm.
out where we talked more about force skyping and how we think that might have happened and what allows
Yep.
it to happen. I
The
will say, I think that to the extent that Snoke does connect their minds the way he says he does, which
mhm.
I don't know that we can believe anything that Snoke
Snoke
says,
says, yeah,
honestly.
I agree.
Um, but I think that obviously it lasted beyond them
Yep.
or beyond
Him.
Snoke.
Yep.
Yeah, and I can't imagine. Like I remember right after the Last Jedi came out, one of the things I said about Raylo is I want them, or I can see them having like a Magneto Professor X relationship
Right.
where
Yeah.
they're like they're just best friends and call each other up all the time. Um, but yeah, I mean XY, that's our thing
Yeah.
is and and we kind of see that as being the world between worlds.
Yep.
Um,
Rey and Kylo
but
were
that
using it without realizing it.
but yeah, if you don't know what that is, that's a lot of context that the people who haven't seen Rebels might be missing right now.
But
Um,
we have that video. You can do Did
yep,
Rebels Explain Force Skype is the name of the video. You can find it on the channel.
yep. I will say my favorite Force Skype moment, at least watching it through this time,
Mm-hmm.
is it's the shirtless Kylo one, but
I
it doesn't
mean,
have anything to do with like what it's. I love it when Ray's like, I really don't want to do this right now, and he's
he's like,
like, I don't either,
yeah, me too.
but here we are, I guess. So
My
like, I
favorite
just
is she's like, do you have something, a cowl or something? You'd be like, first of all, who goes to cowl? Like, not robe, not shirt. She's literally like a cowl. Like, okay, like how do you? Oh, whatever. And then he doesn't respond. He doesn't say no. He just stands there like,
so.
nope.
But I love the inflection in her voice when
Yeah.
she's like, I really don't want to do this right
Right
now.
now.
Um,
Oh man, so good. But
I also wondered too. So this is not a criticism, but maybe is a
mhm,
funny thing that I
yeah,
want to get your thoughts on.
yeah,
So like he says early on, like I can't see your surroundings. Can you see mine?
mhm,
And so like at the end when they're forced skyping,
yeah,
like she closes the ramp on
yep,
the Falcon and starts to leave. Like
yeah.
why why does that close the force Skype or does she close the ramp and he's still looking at her? Because like if the surroundings are not part of the vision, then he literally has no idea that she closed the ramp
That's
on the
amazing.
Falcon.
I have not heard that take before, and that's great. She can shut the door, but well, I mean, like, arguably, they reach a point where they can see the surroundings because the second
No,
time,
yeah.
yeah, because like the second time they Skype, the water comes through, and
And by the
then
end, they're both like literally sitting in the
yeah,
hut. So like,
right,
yeah,
and Luke can see him, but I still think that's funny. Like, what if the door didn't actually close in? He's like, I can still see you.
but
You're still there. You're trying to ignore me, I can tell, but you're totally still there. Oh man, good stuff. Now I do feel like there's a lot there to break down, but I mean this has probably been our longest movie stream to date. So
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I will say that a lot of the things that I feel like I liked about the Last Jedi,
mhm.
um, I think are going to be things that we learn more about in Rise of Skywalker. Like I can't see Force Skyping not coming up again. Like I
Right.
can't see like a lot of this stuff. You know, and what form that takes, I don't know. But
Right.
I feel like we're gonna I was gonna say we're gonna have the last piece of the puzzle, which I guess is truer than I meant it to be. Um, thoughts on Hux? XY wants to know our
Ooh,
thoughts on Hux. We haven't talked about Hux. Um,
hugs. General hugs.
yeah,
If you turn on the closed captioning, he really says hugs, HUGS, which is the best thing. Poor Hux. Hux is the. I mean, I know he's a space Nazi, but like, I mean, he is a space Nazi, but like, he also just is a punching bag that whole movie. Like,
like, literally.
literally, like Snoke pushes him around, Kylo pushes him around. Oh man, no, I think Hux is gonna be. I think we're gonna have a video on this later, but I think we're gonna see Hux is gonna try to cause a schism. My gut theory based on only seeing the trailers and the D23 footage and nothing else, like no TV spots or anything, is that Kylo and Hux are going to turn the or rip the First Order apart
Yeah.
in kind of a civil war.
Well, we've talked about this before in other streams, but I think Hux buys into the First Order as a political movement in a way
Yeah,
that I just don't think Kylo cares about.
right. I agree.
So eventually, whether that's in the Rise of Scott, like eventually, whether it does come to a head,
Right,
it would eventually come to one.
right.
Um, I will say though, since you brought up Hux, I forgot about this. This is my actual biggest complaint
Mm-hmm.
about the Last Jedi is that there's no letter H in Orbish. So like when Poe says starts with an H, I'm like, no, it doesn't. That's not how Orbish works.
It's not a. It starts with a Hesk.
Yep, you've broken canon.
It's ruined. Yeah, but then
Not my Star Wars.
But what about R2D2 and C3PO?
But that's why it's always spelled out.
and L3.
That's why it's always spelled out though, because those aren't necessarily letter designations. They are to us, they're not to them.
All right. All right.
I also really don't care that much in case anyone
That was
thought I
real.
was I've every time Poe is snarky, except when he's snarky to Holdo.
Yeah.
Like I love like
Post.
the Who Talks First stuff from
You
Force
talk first.
Awakens.
I talk first. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh
Um,
man. But yeah, no. I think
oh,
that's what I got. We'll
XY is talking about my girl. I want
Oh,
Ray
Sloan.
Sloan. Where is she? Hashtag Where's Ray Sloan?
Where's her Disney Plus series? I mean, really,
Yes, please.
Ray Sloan is the best. Um,
Um,
but we're gonna have, in theory, our hope is to do a speculation video before the movie comes out, and then Wednesday, for those of you who have access to Disney Plus or acquire Disney Plus, Wednesday is the next Mandalorian episode. They're dropping it on
yep.
Wednesday instead of Friday. I'm assuming simply so it doesn't conflict with release weekend of Rise of Skywalker. A lot of people are really hoping there's a bigger reason for that, but we'll see. I don't think so. I mean, I know there's going to be like a sneak preview on it that I'm not going to watch because I don't. I'm just going to watch the movie at this point. But I think we're gonna, or so we'll have that review, and then Wednesday is the first issue of the Charles Soule Kylo Ren comic. So
Yep.
there's a lot of big stuff coming out.
I will also say if you haven't seen it yet, YB is still doing reviews of every Resistance episode too. So one of those just went up yesterday for the newest episode, and it's one that is more relevant maybe than like I know people have been critical of Resistance as not being like plotty enough, but it was a plotty episode. So
Mm-hmm.
go watch it and see some of your favorite Last Jedi characters.
That's right. Looks like Nolan has a quick question. Wonder if he's typing it now. What is your question, Nolan? Give me right to But the Grisk is the main antagonist, maybe.
That would be cool.
If not, I mean, can also always get the question in the Discord. You binged your first season?
This
Yes.
is true.
You were watching Resistance. I'm a big fan of Resistance. I love it so much. So I'm excited.
I do too. While we Nate on Nolan's question,
Yep.
we'll go ahead and do our social media plugs. So
Yeah.
you can find us on all the places. We're on Facebook. We may not actually be there right now because we're
Yeah.
kind of taking a break until after we watch the film. But you
Yeah.
should go follow us on Instagram and on Twitter and on Facebook.
Yep.
And join our Discord if you're not there already. That's one of the biggest places where we keep these conversations going.
Yep.
After the streams are done.
And give you updates on when the streams happen because we are not always the most consistent with scheduling.
If you haven't already, you can also like the stream while you're hanging out. And if you're not already, you can go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you hit the notification bell, you will get notified. Even though we are incredibly regular, despite what YB just said, and on time with all of our streams. If you hit the bell, you'll get notified. Let's see.
With all the hate
Uh,
and battles from the movies, what are your thoughts that nobody from Star Wars verse hates? So, like, why is Mandalorian not getting as much hate? Just flip vertically.
because it's good, and we all love Baby Yoda.
I'm not flipped vertically.
You are on the stream. I'm noticing that now. I don't know. Anyway, though, but that's gonna do it for us today. Um, we'll probably do a review of Resistance Reborn. We may not do a whole other stream conversation about it though.
Yeah. But
But
we'll see.
but yeah, I think that's gonna do it for us today.
Yeah, this was a great conversation. Thank you guys so much. So many of you here. I saw Bare Naked Gaming floated into partway through. He just got done his first stream of I think it's the remake of Resident Evil 2. So you guys should check out his channel. But thank you all for being here. This was so wonderful. And we will talk to you guys soon.
Yep. Bye guys.